You know that feeling, don't you? You decide, right, I'm going to learn a new language. You grab a textbook, open it up, and,
Yeah.
well, it's just so dull.
Yeah, really stiff dialogues, isn't it? Like, where is the train station?
Exactly. Or, my name is John.
Yeah.
Stuff you'd almost never say like that.
Yeah.
And then you try a real conversation.
Oh, forget it. Total deer in headlights.
It's so frustrating. And honestly, a lot of it just doesn't stick.
It's a really common trap, actually. Traditional methods, they break language down into these little pieces, grammar rules, vocab lists.
Right.
Which is useful maybe for structure, but it doesn't really prep you for, real life talking.
Yeah, you end up knowing about the language, but not really feeling like you can use it.
Precisely.
So, today we're doing a deep dive into something that takes a totally different path. It's a book called 101 Conversations in Simple English by Ollie Richards.
Oh, Ollie Richards. Good stuff.
And our mission here is to unpack how this book uses this, well, unique story-driven method. But here's the real kicker. It's not just a language book. It's actually a pretty compelling mystery, like a proper thriller hidden inside.
Seriously, a thriller.
Yeah, all while it's teaching you practical English, sort of under the radar. So we're going to look at what it is, why this method works so well, and then honestly just get lost in this really fascinating story it tells.
That sounds brilliant. It's like the book itself is the method, showing how immersive stories can be maybe the most natural way to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start with the person behind it all, Ollie Richards.
Right. He's quite well known in language learning circles. Speaks, 8 languages?
8 languages, yeah, and written over 20 books. And his whole thing, his core belief, is learning through story. The power of narrative.
And his own story is pretty inspiring, too, isn't it? Didn't he start learning French quite late?
Yeah, at 19, with, like he says, no special talent for it. He had to figure it all out from zero.
Which is great because it shows anyone can do it. It's not some magic gift.
Totally. It busts that myth of needing to be gifted. And that connects directly to this really crucial idea he talks about, intensive versus extensive learning.
Ah, yes. This is key. Intensive is what most people think of, right?
Right. Poring over a text, dictionary in hand, analyzing every single word, every grammar point, trying to understand absolutely everything.
Very slow, very detailed. You don't cover much ground that way.
And that's what schools often emphasize, right? The intensive part.
Exactly. But Ollie flips that. He says people massively overestimate intensive study, and they drastically underestimate the power of extensive study.
Which feels a bit weird at first, you know. My gut says look up everything.
I know, but extensive is the opposite. It's about reading for enjoyment, for the main idea. Reading. Just reading. Don't stop for every unknown word. Don't get bogged down in grammar. Just read it through. Try to get the gist.
Okay.
The goal is just to read and finish the material. And the benefit, you cover so much more language, loads of exposure.
So it's like that passive acquisition thing, like how kids pick up their first language.
Exactly like that. You're absorbing patterns, vocabulary, structure, almost without realizing it. Your brain's doing the work subconsciously.
And it trains you to be more independent, I suppose, not relying on a dictionary constantly.
Absolutely. It builds confidence and fluency in a much more natural way.
Well, how do you actually learn if you're skipping words you don't know?
Well, that's the insight, isn't it? You don't need every word. Your brain is amazing at figuring things out from context. You focus on the main story, enjoy it, and your brain just starts connecting the dots, picking up the patterns. You're learning implicitly.
So focus on the big picture, not every tiny detail.
Precisely. Enjoy the journey, understand the main ideas, and trust the process.
Okay, so how does he suggest you actually use the book then? This 101 Conversations book.
He lays out a really simple 5-step process. Step 1, read the little intro for each conversation, just for context.
Easy enough.
Step 2, read the whole conversation through once. Don't stop. Just get the gist.
Okay, resist the urge to look things up.
Exactly. Step 3, read it again, maybe a bit slower this time, picking up a bit more detail, but still focused on overall meaning.
Right.
Step 4, repeat that a couple more times if you want, until you feel pretty comfortable with what's happening. Not perfect, just comfortable.
Got it. And step 5.
Step 5 is crucial. Move on.
Just move on. Even if you don't understand everything.
Yep. The real value comes from getting through the whole book, getting that massive exposure. He has this great line, something like,
oh yeah,
instead of worrying about the things you don't understand, try to focus instead on everything that you do understand.
I like that. It shifts the focus from what you lack to what you're gaining. Less pressure.
Totally. It's about building momentum, feeling successful, not getting stuck on perfection.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
How does a book full of simple dialogues keep you hooked enough to read the whole thing?
Ah, well, that is where the genius of the integrated mystery comes in. This isn't just random dialogues.
Right, you said it was a thriller.
It is. It's a proper detective story woven through the conversations. We meet Natalie, who's an art historian,
Yeah.
very observant, and her friend Alice, who's actually a mystery novelist herself.
Oh, convenient.
Isn't it? They're on holiday in London, and it starts quite normally, just a visit to Camden Market.
So the language learning feels almost secondary to finding out what happens next.
Pretty much. The story pulls you along.
So Camden Market,
Mm-hmm.
what happens? This is where it gets interesting, right?
Yeah, this is where it kicks off. Natalie's browsing in this little antique shop run by a guy named Robert Greene,
So-
and she spots these drawings. And her art historian brain just goes into overdrive. She thinks, hang on,
What are they?
they look like originals by William Turner, you know, the famous English painter?
Wow, Turner, in a random Camden shop.
Exactly. And they're priced at only £100.
No way.
Yeah.
That's crazy cheap. Alarm bells.
Huge alarm bells for Natalie. And Robert Greene, the shop owner, he's a bit vague. Says some man sold them to him hours ago. He didn't know what they were worth.
Sounds fishy.
Alice thinks so too. Her mystery writer senses are tingling. She says something is not right about this whole situation.
Okay, so the setup is there. Suspicion, dodgy antiques dealer.
Spot on. And then the next day, bam, news breaks.
What news?
William Turner drawings have been stolen from a wealthy collector nearby, a guy called Lawrence Windsor. And the descriptions match the ones Natalie saw.
Whoa, okay, so they were stolen.
Seems like it. But then, twist number 2,
Ooh,
Robert Greene's shop gets broken into, and the drawings are stolen again.
what? So, stolen, sold cheap, then stolen back.
Or
Or,
maybe it's 2 different thieves. That's the big question that drives the whole middle part of the book. Keeps you reading, right?
definitely, you need to know what's going on. So they start investigating.
They do. Alice, the novelist, and Natalie, the art historian, decide to figure it out. They go to Lawrence Windsor's mansion.
The guy whose drawings were stolen first.
Right. And they find out something crucial. Only Lawrence and his daughter, Mariana, have keys to the art room where the drawings were kept.
Ah, okay, so the suspect list just got very small.
Very small. And the book cleverly uses dialogues with the staff to drop more clues.
Like what?
Well, Charlie the cleaner heard someone in the coat wardrobe on a hot day. Odd. Arta the gardener saw someone leaving around 10:30 a.m. wearing a coat and hat, even though it was boiling hot.
Hiding their face, maybe?
Looks like it. Then the cooks, Liz and Jacob, mention other small things have gone missing lately, like a valuable silver salt shaker.
Okay, so maybe a pattern.
And they mention the daughter, Mariana, often skips lunch to read her comic books. Seems irrelevant, but...
Ah, but maybe it's not comic books.
Exactly, hold that thought. Then there's the security guard, Daniel. The footage shows only 3 people left the house that morning before 11 a.m.
Right.
Lawrence himself, the nanny Pauline who was actually out of town, so that's weird, and a mysterious figure wearing Charlie the cleaner's coat and hat, face hidden. This person leaves at 10:30 and comes back at 11.
The person the gardener saw.
And get this, Alice and Natalie actually saw a man in a hat hanging around Robert Greene's shop earlier.
Yeah.
And they see him again on the security footage talking to police later.
Okay, so many threads. How does it all tie together? The daughter. The comics.
Right, the comic books. This is the clever twist. Mariana is obsessed with comics. She has this huge, valuable collection, buys rare ones from places like
Camden Market.
Camden Market. She was desperate for this super rare, century-old comic, Little Nemo in Slumberland, signed original.
Wow, worth a lot.
A fortune.
Yeah.
And we learned she and her dad, Lawrence, had fought about how much money she was spending on comics.
Motive, maybe. Tension in the family.
And then the big confession comes. Mariana breaks down.
She did it.
She did. She admits taking the drawings. She says Robert Greene, the antiques dealer, told her about doing trade-offs.
Trade-offs.
Yeah, she started small, taking that silver salt shaker you mentioned. And then she took the Turner drawings to trade them with Robert Greene for the Little Nemo comic.
Whoa. So Green put her up to it.
Seems like it. She used Charlie's coat and hat to sneak past the cameras, not even realizing how valuable the drawings really were. She just wanted the comic.
And she begged Green to lie for her afterwards.
Yep. So, what does that tell us about Robert Greene?
He's definitely dodgy.
Huh.
He lied about who sold him the drawings. First, a man. Then he changed it to a woman matching the nanny's description.
Right. And that call he supposedly made to an art expert, Michael Wood, or Wright,
Let me guess. Fake.
Totally fake. Police checked his phone records, no calls. There is a real expert called Michael Wright, but he says Green sells stolen stuff and they haven't spoken in ages.
So Green knew they were valuable all along.
Mm.
He got Mariana to steal them for him, traded the comic.
And then when the news broke about how much the Turners were really worth...
He staged the break-in at his own shop to steal them back.
Exactly. He's the second thief. Clever, huh?
Devious. So did they catch him?
Oh, yeah. The end is this fun chase scene through London. Natalie, Alice, and Detective Smith are on electric city bikes, chasing Green.
On bikes. Love it.
It gets dramatic. Green pulls a gun.
Whoa.
But then, out of nowhere, this cab driver, Pete, who they'd met earlier, uses his kid's baseball bat, just happened to have it in the cab, and knocks Green out.
The cabbie saves the day. Brilliant.
Isn't it? Pure coincidence with the bat.
Right.
And they find the Turner drawings in Green's briefcase. Case closed.
Fantastic. What a story. So what happens after all that drama?
Well, the ending is actually quite thoughtful. Lawrence Windsor, the collector, he has a change of heart.
Oh, yeah.
He decides the art is too important to keep locked away. He donates his entire collection, all the valuable stuff, to the National Gallery.
Wow. That's huge for the public to see.
Yeah, better security, too. And Mariana follows suit in her own way.
With the comics.
Yep. She donates most of her rare comic collection to the Cartoon Museum. Keeps a few favorites, but they both realize family time is more important than collecting.
That's a nice touch. Character growth.
Definitely. And the rewards are interesting, too. Lawrence offers Natalie and Alice £5,000 each. Big reward.
Did they take it?
Nope. They give their shares to Pete, the hero cab driver.
Oh, that's great. To help him out.
Yeah, help him buy a new bike for his son, maybe save up for his own cab license.
Good on him. So what do they get out of it besides the adventure?
Well, they get their dream jobs, basically.
Really? How?
The director of the National Gallery offers Natalie a job as the new curator for the special Windsor Hall where the donated art will be displayed. Turns out the director already knew her from her university record.
Perfect for her.
Right.
And Alice, the mystery writer.
She gets a book deal. Her favorite crime publisher, Raymond, wants her to write a true crime novel about the exact case they just solved. She apparently faints with excitement.
Huh? Couldn't write it better myself.
So
happy endings all around.
Almost. There's one more twist. Remember the mysterious man in the hat they kept seeing?
Yeah. Who was he?
His name is Bernard. He's an investigator for something called the Historians Club.
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
It's like this secret society that solves mysteries related to art, history, archaeology, that sort of thing.
Cool.
And he invites Natalie and Alice to join, setting things up nicely for more adventures, maybe in another book.
Very clever. Keeps you wanting more.
And the final cherry on top, Detective Smith tells them, the Windsors.
Wait, the royal family?
Yep. They want to thank Natalie and Alice personally at the palace.
Get out. That's quite an ending.
A very British finale, isn't it?
Wow. Okay, so we've just gone on quite the journey there, haven't we? From, the theory of language learning.
Right, the intensive versus extensive.
All the way through this genuinely gripping mystery story, all inside one book designed to teach English.
It really shows how learning can actually be, fun and exciting, full of those aha moments.
Absolutely. That story element, it doesn't just make picking up the language feel more natural. It makes the whole experience so much more engaging, more memorable.
You're learning almost by accident because you're just enjoying the content,
Yeah.
Whether it's the language part or the actual whodunit.
It really highlights that maybe the best learning happens when you're not focused on learning, but just on understanding and enjoying something.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is how this book, aimed at teaching simple English, ends up exploring quite deep things about people through its plot, doesn't it?
That's true. Greed, deceit, but also forgiveness, passion, heroism.
Exactly. It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other kind of hidden depths or unexpected adventures might be lurking in places you wouldn't expect, just waiting to be uncovered if you engage with them?